All right, back with telephone poles, part 3. There are times in which you have a need for objects that are evenly spaced apart that shrink and go away from you down the street. Say there's a car parked here and a car parked behind it and another one. They're going to rapidly appear to shrink, again in length and in height as they go off in the distance. But they're probably parked very similarly apart because of parking meters, and the measurement of parking spaces is pretty specific. So this method that we're going to do works for telephone poles, it works for fence posts, it works for parking meters, maybe it's trees that you plant going down the road. Okay, so we're going to represent just a single vertical line, and we're going to work with the idea of telephone poles. So I'm going to start at the bottom of my road here, way down here at the bottom. See where my little diagonal line goes back to the vanishing point. I'm going to start down here, and I'm going to place with a single line my first telephone pole. Okay, again, this is not a three-dimensional looking pole at all yet. It is just placing, this is where it goes. This is where it starts down here, and this is how tall it is currently as the pole that seems to be closest to us. All right, we know that the poles are going to shrink as they go off in the distance, so we're going to create a guideline. And my guidelines, I think I mentioned this in the 9 squares video, are normally like little dotted lines because they're a little bit easier to erase. There's fewer of them than a big heavy line that I have to like really work with the eraser to get rid of. So this shows how the tops of the telephone poles are going to shrink. So you can't draw a pole any taller than this dotted line, and it can't go below our street level. You with me? All right, now we're going to draw pole number 2. And pole number 2 is going to live what appears to be, to you, halfway down the street. So this kind of feels about halfway down the street. The greatest distance between two objects happens between here. Okay, after this, things start to get more close off in the distance. So the widest gap happens between pole 1 and pole 2. Okay, number along with me so we can kind of keep talking about those different poles, and you'll have this as sort of a resource later if you go to use this method in your actual drawing, because it counts for more points when you work with the pole method in some way in your drawing. So we want to find the halfway point between these two poles. You know, logic would say, well, measure in between it, Miss Martin, and then divide it in half. Well, that's the measurement if these things were the exact same size facing me, but they're going away from me. So that method doesn't work. We're going to have to do a different method, and it's called finding the visual center. Because it's not the mathematical center, but it's the visual one as things are being stretched down to the vanishing point. So I'm going to start with 2 guidelines, one from the top of pole 1 down to pole 2, and then I'm going to go the opposite direction, top of pole 2 down to pole 1, and where they intersect is our visual center. Looky there. This is the stretched perspective middle between these two poles. It is the visual center, okay? One last guideline, and then I'm going to show you how we can start making more telephone poles. I'm going to line up my ruler here to here and create one last guideline between the visual center that we just made and our vanishing point that we have. So I'm going to take this and do my little dots. Little dotted line. Okay, I call this one the uber important guideline because we need this line to make all the other poles. All right, you're going to put your ruler at the top of 1, and then it's going to go the rest of the way right here where the uber important guideline intersects that second pole. One more time. I'm lined up with my top pole through this new intersection, my uber guideline, touching pole 2, and down here on the ground level, I'm going to make a little dot. That little dot tells me exactly where my pole 3 is growing from. Ain't that a kicker? Okay, Let's do that again. I'm going to start from pole 2 now. Aha! The top of pole 2, right there, through, looky there, pole 3, right here. Here's my little Uber guideline, touching pole 3. I come down to the ground level. I make a little mark. That's pole 4. Looky there. Easy cheesy. All right, keep going. Pole 3 through pole 4 makes 5. Pole 4 through pole 5 makes 6, and so on. So let me make a guideline here, right there, and a little dot right at the bottom. And I come up with number 5, and I can go from the top there through there, and look how fast these scrunched up. Woo! They got really scrunchy. Okay, so we're looking at a plain stick, right? And you're like, Miss Martin, I don't see a pole yet anywhere. Fine. Okay, you could go about and erase some of our guidelines here, just so you can kind of get a better visual of this as we go. We do still want to keep the horizon line because we see that in between poles. To make yourself feel like you actually have a dimensional pole, curving the top and curving the bottom gives you a rounded pole, okay? Because it's inserted into the ground, we still see its roundness down there. So the thickness, though, will shrink as you go off in the distance. So my pole is a little bit wider here than it is here. It's going to get significantly smaller back here, and then shrink ever so skinny back there, and then so on. There's almost nothing to show here until you get down to number 5, 6, right? I mean, you could do the whole little, let's create some wire lines that kind of connect between those guys. You know, you could take something from the back side and go, okay, there's that pole there. It's creating another line. It's going to go woo. So you can kind of give that essence or feel. Now, like I said, this process can be done with several things. Now, you don't have to draw these, but I did want to show you really quickly some things that it could be. Say these were parking meters. Well, then you would have only drawn your first line up as tall as you think a parking meter would be, and you would have gone and then these guys would have been much shorter. All right. If they were parking meters, you could then put, like, you know, a little parking meter kind of head on the top of them, and then the little parking meter head would shrink as it goes down the street. Heck, you can pull out horizontal lines that kind of give us the feeling of parking spaces. So if you give yourself a guideline there, this is where they would get chopped off. And I could say, there is the front of the parking space. Here's the back of the parking space. See? There's the next parking space. There's the next, and so on. See how fast they get close together? Okay. So this illusion could happen for several things. What if these were fence posts? Well, then I could keep going with horizontal lines from the vanishing point, and I could create slats of wood that are actually on a fence post. Okay, and you can have a fence post that comes across, you know, you've been nailed together, and la 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 la. Okay, are you getting the feeling for this? So once you get your stuff spaced, everything else comes from your vanishing point to make things feel like they're going away off in the distance. Look at that. So don't take offense to this style of drawing. So there you go. So once you've got your basic draw along with me, and you finished out the telephone poles, again, take a photograph of your finished project hanging up on something, whether it's a tape to the wall or on your refrigerator, so you get a nice front view, non-obscured, non-twisted point of view as you turn this in.